Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and just a little while back I watched the Pixar movie Coco. I really enjoyed it, I thought it had amazing animation, and the story was just wonderful. I did my usual thing where I watch through the movie and take tons of notes on how I think it will end. Usually I end up predicting the ending, but then I'm left with a ton of other plots that could have been. And beneath the surface of the film, they still could be. There are questions left unanswered, like why is the guitar cursed, or how does Hector have a photograph of himself in this quasi-afterlife? But those have already been effectively answered by a few others, so there isn't a whole lot left for me to solve here. Which brings me to some things I found to be possible plot holes. I am going to try and answer all major questions left unanswered by this film. Here we go. The land of the dead is old, I assume. They have a massive society full of souls tethered to skeletons, and based off of the photographs and people's memories that fuel the afterlife, it can be assumed that this entire land is powered by the Mexicans' belief in it. And that's all fine and dandy, but how the heck would people be remembered without having their picture out? Sorry, what I mean is, before cameras were made commonplace, how were people remembered throughout generations? Were they immortalized in paintings and drawings? Possibly, but that seems far less capable. I believe that the land of the dead was a place people could go so long as their close family back on Earth could remember them, because there were no photographs way back when. This explains perfectly why Imelda's parents and grandparents cannot be seen anywhere in the land of the dead. They were never immortalized in photographs. This matches up perfectly with when cameras were made commonplace in real life too, right around the time Coco was born, early 1900s. The time is perfectly matched. I don't believe the land of the dead used to be designed for people to be remembered in photographs, hence why the sheer level of overpopulation is being made more and more apparent. I mean, just look at their houses. Stacks upon stacks upon stacks of overpopulation because this land needs to evolve. They seem to have computers now, which is a bonus, as they are adapting to memories instilled in photography. But yeah, the big question I had when watching this movie was about where Imelda's parents were, and the answer is, they final dead. So then if they're gone, there's another very important question. What happens to spirits after their final death? This is when the spirits are completely forgotten back on Earth. This is when their photographs are not put out, and the last living person forgets about them. They begin to vanish and finally die completely. Is the skeleton world like a purgatory that sends them to heaven or hell after they're forgotten? Possibly. I mean, it's also literally called the Land of the Dead, which is the same name, coincidentally, as the afterlife in The Corpse Bride. Different company made that movie, but I made a theory on The Corpse Bride in which I basically discussed how Corpse Bride's Land of the Dead is a purgatory, and people get to move on after everything is over with their memory. They go to heaven or to hell based off of how they behaved in this purgatory. This incorporates all ends of the afterlife spectrum into one concept, which actually makes more sense here. And if this land of the dead was a true afterlife, end all be all, then I highly doubt that living animals could go back and forth to and from it. They can interact with the ghosts and enter the land of the dead even without being cursed, so it makes me believe that the land of the dead is a physical, middle ground dimension designed as a positive, non-purging version of purgatory. So that was sort of 4 questions answered there. Where are Imelda's parents? Why is the land of the dead so overpopulated looking? How can animals transcend it? And where do skeletons go after final death? That was swift as hell, but there's a bigger question looming over all this. What is the very specific definition of who remembers you? For example, if you transplanted your consciousness into a computer, would it still count as you remembering someone? Or do you need to have a physical brain and body? What is the law here? Where is the line drawn? Who makes up the rules? I mean, Miguel saw Hector, but Hector still began to die away since Miguel only saw him when he himself was also a ghostly presence. Therefore, the line appears to be drawn at only people who have a physical body and brain remembering you. And also, neat to note, the picture set out needs to be your face, not your body, as we see with Hector. This is all very interesting, and I am intrigued by who created these rules. Obviously, it's the person ruling over the land of the dead. I'm just not too sure quite yet who that is. Maybe for another video. I went on Twitter and asked for questions people had about the lore. Solving theories is very easy. It's the easiest part. It's coming up with the questions that is immensely time-consuming. If you have any questions about this movie, please do ask them in the comments. I have an affinity for troubleshooting evidence. A person on Twitter asked a very key question. They asked about why Ernesto de la Cruz suddenly made the decision to kill Hector. Ernesto and Hector were childhood friends and best pals, so why would he just outright kill him? I believe Ernesto was the one who lured Hector away from his family so that they could be famous musicians, but Ernesto's lack of a similar situation, a family, led him not to care about Hector's internal conflict. Ernesto didn't even know if he himself had a great-grandson or not, therefore let alone children at all. Hector being held back from greatness by his family was something the now narcissistic and deluded Ernesto de la Cruz couldn't afford to lose, so he needed to steal the songs. Basically, he has no hatred or hard feelings against Hector, it was just a matter of business after realizing that Hector found his family more important than his music. And so here's my theory on Ernesto's thought process. Hector finding his family more important than music, that alone probably broke Ernesto, since he'd been childhood friends with Hector and music was like their baby. In his own twisted and narcissistic way, Ernesto thought of Hector leaving music in the same way as Imelda thought of Hector leaving Coco. Ernesto probably hated Imelda, the singing woman that butted into their musical partnership. His hatred for Hector probably grew and grew after marrying Imelda and having Coco. Even Miguel, who he assumed was his own great-great-grandson, he ditched in a ditch. It wasn't personal, it was his greater love for himself and music. And because he didn't deny Miguel being related to him, it means that he's probably been with dozens of side chicks on his travels, and he has no idea how many of them had his children. This just got immensely 18+, but it's true. So that's my theory.